Welcome to the ZBrush podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Just a quick reminder, we have an official Pixelogic Discord channel that you can follow. We'll post a link here wherever you're listening or viewing to join us. So please join us on Discord. We've got a huge community growing. A lot of our ZBrushLIVE streamers and people that have been tuning into our ZBrushLIVE content will be there. So if you want to be a part of that community, join us on Discord. And this episode comes to you from the ZBrush Summit with ZBrush artist Krystal Sae Eua. Krystal's a rock star artist with an incredible portfolio. You can find her on Instagram and all the social medias and her whole portfolio online under the name I Am Sad Panda. And Krystal's worked in the VFX industry for over 10 years. She's worked as a modeling, texture artist. She focuses now primarily on being a lead character and creature artist and sculptor, as well as texturing. And she's worked on tons of awesome projects, including Avatar, The Avengers, 2012, Fast and the Furious, Call of Duty Ghost, the cinematic trailer. She has been working for Blur Studios as a lead character artist. If you're unfamiliar with Blur, well, shame on you, number one. But Blur Studios is very well known for their cinematics, their incredible cinematics for all kinds of things. Video games, yes, but also including full feature films, and the list goes on and on. You can check out Blur Studios. And Krystal being a part of that team, it was really great to finally sit down with an artist from this studio. And we talked a lot about just what her experiences were to, find success and how to stay positive, motivated. Talked a lot about movies. So we hope you enjoy this podcast. This is a fun one to do with Krystal, and we were so lucky to have her as our guest. So without further ado, Krystal Sae Eua on the ZBrush podcast. I have to officially thank you for coming on to the podcast. It's a true honor.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
For inviting me. This is awesome.
Yeah. Is this your first time at the summit?
No.
So you were here last year?
I was here in, I think, 2015.
Okay.
With the mill.
Oh, the mill. That's right.
Right. Yeah. I mostly interacted with Louis and Paul.
Yes.
At that time. So.
Yeah. Cool. So you've been with Blur Studios for how long?
It's exactly a year now.
Wow. I've heard of Blur Studios. You guys have some incredible projects. Like I was looking at your portfolio. You've got tons of projects like Avengers. You've done Call of Duty, cinematics. You've done film. You've done all these things. Blur Studios has kind of got a huge array of projects and that kind of stuff. Is it pretty intense? The kind of workload?
Workload. Let me think here. It is so much more satisfying to me artistically to work there than any other place that doesn't. I feel like the workload in VFX was way heavier, and it was less fun.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So what's the difference then as far as is it just the kinds of projects that you're given where you get maybe more creative freedom now to explore things and design more?
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely part of it. It's the freedom to design. Also being in a senior position, it helps because then you're trusted more to do the designs. You also are trusted to make something that's harder to make and not, there's a lot of little jobs that you have to do in a VFX pipeline in order to get a shot out.
I see.
So it could be modeling a tracked ground, for a week. And it just drive you insane.
Which is not the most fun thing to do always.
No.
And it's something that's just a prop or an asset that's going to be mixed in a bunch of other things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes the shot work, but you won't necessarily get to see it.
I see.
And you know that, and that's part of the growing and learning about how to be a good visual effects artist. But at Blur, because it's entirely CG as well, you have to make everything.
Right.
And I'm not involved in environments as well, so I'm on the character team, and I've never been at a place where there was a giant character team.
Yeah.
It's just been me and maybe two other anatomy nerds that like characters enough to care about it,
Yeah, totally.
And then you have to fill it in with a generalist toolkit.
I see.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I guess, in Blur Studios, you guys, the team there is massive. And Blur has always been one of my favorites. I love cinematics so much, and the quality of work that comes out of that studio is so incredible.
Oh, me too. I was dreaming about it
I bet.
8 years ago.
Was that something that you had sort of worked to try to get to as far as your career goals? Did you have? Well, I guess let's go back to the beginning. Before You were a student in Noman, correct? You graduated from Noman, so we're here in the Noman store.
Yes.
You're familiar with this campus fairly well?
I am, but this Snowman store didn't exist when I went.
Oh, okay. So you were a few generations back, I guess?
05, 06?
Yeah, I bet a lot has changed.
A lot. There was only Lab 5 just opened.
Wow, that's crazy. So the school has gotten so much bigger and
so much bigger. It's super nice.
It is very nice.
Yeah.
I love it. They're very gracious to let us use the space and record in here, which is awesome. So when you got started, did you intend to go into visual effects and CG, or were you a 2D artist at the beginning?
At the beginning, I wanted to animate Lion King. Basically, I wanted to hand draw, 2D animate traditionally, and that's what I first went to school for at this place called Brooks College in Long Beach.
Okay.
It was like a little tiny, like, for-profit college that ended up not being a really great educational experience, and I needed something else. And also that was at the same time when they started laying off every single Disney animator.
Oh, gosh.
So like
it was
2D.
very scary to go into that industry at that time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
2D was dying in America, at least for features.
Right.
And especially not in Los Angeles. So taking one 3ds Max class in that little school kind of led me to getting more into this and learning more online. And
that's interesting.
Yeah.
So you actually learned a lot of those skills in 2D. Like you were sort of in that process already when you transitioned to 3D?
A little bit. So I learned basics of 3ds Max and the theory of animation. So like I thought I was going to be an animator this whole time.
Yeah.
And I still did when I started Noman.
Wow.
So I was just thinking, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn how to animate like Pixar films or something. And my first ZBrush class with Miguel Ortega changed my mind completely.
And you said Miguel is now one of your mentors. You still keep in touch with him? And
Oh, yeah. He's fantastic. I mean, he got me my first feature job at Cafe FX and has been like just a really kind influence in my life until now. And like,
that's incredible.
Yeah.
It's always great to keep those mentors around, I think, like to maintain friendships because, I'm sure as you've progressed as an artist, your title is now you're character designer and sculptor primarily.
It's a character lead artist.
Lead artist.
And a sculptor. So it's a little bit different where the design could come from us or the design could come from whatever wherever our client is, like whatever game studio or whatever it is. So we definitely put input in the design, but as a lead character artist, I kind of have to keep the team up to quality standards and make sure that things can move through the pipeline. So it's a production title. Yeah.
So for you, a lot of your stuff, you might get conceptual art that comes in 2D or whatever, and then you need to go translate that to 3D, and there's tons of revisions and all that stuff that goes back and forth between that process when you're going through building something, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's so you do get a lot of creative freedom still to sort of in the round, you get to adjust these things and kind of keep contributing in that way.
Exactly. And that's
great.
The most fun.
Yeah.
Just talking. And I was just talking to, so my coworker, Frankie, he's going to present with me later. We were just nerding out about like different crab shells that we could possibly reference and like just watching molting crabs and stuff. I was like, this is the best.
I've said this so many times on the podcast. I'll say it again. Like the CG artist Google search history, like if people were to see that publicly,
it's madness.
We would look like crazy people, because like the kinds of stuff you like crustaceans and all these kinds of, different creatures. And I mean, like we always look to anatomy and animals for inspiration, and just the kind of stuff that we search is so nuts.
Oh yeah, it's intense. And one of my coworkers who was an effects artist, he was really worried that he was going to be on some kind of terrorist watch list, just looking up all the different specific types of explosions. And he's just like, I'm worried, you guys.
There should be some sort of like indication of your, because I would imagine that we might be, there might be some artists out there that people are, like, okay, this has been searched far too many times on this person's account.
Exactly.
That's great. So I guess since you've trained, so going back 3ds Max, and then you started at Noman. So at what point did you start getting into ZBrush? Like, was that just a sort of process of going through the program?
Yeah. So the first ZBrush class with Miguel, I think I can't even remember what term it was because it was just a 2-year term at that time.
Yeah.
And it was a certificate program. And I think it was one of the first times because they teach you generalist stuff, the first pack of terms, and then you start bleeding off into electives.
Yeah.
When
electives.
you try to figure like which path you want to go on, because you could be an animator, a lighter, texture artist.
Sure. And at that stage, you're
modeler.
still trying to figure it out. You're getting introduced to all of these things. And for you coming from 2D, that's sort of a one direct path. You're just using 2-dimensional skills and maybe animating. But in 3D, you have so many different outlets. And it does become kind of a challenge, right? To figure out which way you want to go.
Totally. Yeah. And that ZBrush class, the most fun.
Was it?
Yeah. And just seeing his work, because he was working on, I think, Underworld.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he had those werewolves.
Time period.
It's like, oh, man, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And then I remember he had on his website, like a picture of his like nerd closet where he just kept all of this. He was like, this is the stuff I spend all my money on. And it was just like all the cool stuff.
It's like art books, toys.
Oh, it was like a life-size replica of Han Solo and Carbonite.
That's amazing.
Like everything. I mean,
that's so cool.
He still displays his stuff like in the coolest way possible.
Yeah.
So much cool stuff.
So what was your first character design that you did in that class? Can you remember?
I did a bust of the Man-Bat from the Batman series.
Oh, sweet.
So it was just kind of like I guess inspired a little bit by his werewolf design.
Yeah.
And just kind of getting used to the tools and learning basic poly paint and
at this stage, this is probably pre-Dynamesh, so you're working with maybe Z-spheres and subdivisions and sculpting in that way.
I think it was the technique where you build your base mesh first in Maya.
Oh, yeah.
And then you bring it in.
Yeah. I remember those days.
Yeah.
Dynamesh has made all of that so much better, right?
It's so much better.
And then now Sculptors Pro. Have you used Sculptors Pro much?
Yeah.
Sculptors Pro it's a different transition, right? It's still...
I'm used to doing the like swiping, and I'm like, oh, wait, I don't have to anymore.
It's like this muscle memory thing where you're going back and forth from one, but it's almost, I find it very exciting to have some of those things and transition into a new technique.
Yeah.
Although it might be different, then you start to find new things that excite you and get you, pumped to keep on making more stuff. And yeah.
Totally. And what's great about ZBrush is they're always pushing making the creative experience, like getting rid of a lot of nonsense that has to do with that creative experience.
Yes.
So every new thing they come out with seems like, oh, I don't even have to think about this anymore.
Right. You just get to kind of just let loose and make whatever you want. You think it, and you make it.
Exactly.
That's
you don't
great.
have to know all the stuff, scale and
right.
Production stuff that my brain's filled with.
Oh, I'm sure.
And like I have to let that go when I'm doing my personal work. Like this is great.
Yeah.
All creativity.
So working for Blur now, you guys are, I'm sure is a lot of character work that you do now, just as far as, character, clothing, those kinds of props and things, human anatomy. What's your personal style? Like, what are the things that you gravitate towards in your work? Is it animals? Is it creatures?
It's animals for sure.
Yeah.
I think the natural world is so interesting. I watch nature programs constantly. I love going to zoos.
Yeah.
Taxidermy is so interesting to me.
How much Blue Planet do you watch? Or
all.
Aren't they the best?
The best.
Sometimes I put those on before I go to sleep.
David Attenborough is
he's the best.
Like an ocean wave. He's so great.
His voice is the most incredible.
It's the best.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. I think that's why I put it on when I go to sleep, because it's just listening to David Attenborough talk about crustaceans or whatever it is that he's talking about at the time. It doesn't matter. It could be, something eating another thing, and he might be describing it in great length or detail, but it doesn't matter. It's just the voice just puts me to sleep.
Yeah, he's so great. And I watch all those. There's the Hunt series as well that he
does.
does.
Yeah, I have not watched those yet.
Fantastic.
Okay, I'm going to watch.
It's really good. And then, of course, Planet Earth 1 and 2.
Yes.
Amazing photography just alone. And I get so much inspiration from that. And I just love seeing animals in motion.
Yeah.
It's my favorite thing. And that's kind of what I tend to gravitate towards when I make personal work.
Yeah, we've got some of your work up here. You have incredible sculpture work. Even, that's a great example. You have the dog in perfect running motion. And is it difficult, for you as an artist transitioning through all of this? You start with anatomy and you spend a lot of time working on just muscle and shape, but then the dynamism when you start moving things around. What was that process like for you as an artist, sort of developing those things? I mean, is it watching things like BBC Blue Planet and all of these things to start visualizing that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, observation is number one. I mean, the thing is, you have to basically learn the alphabet first before you can start writing.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to learn the alphabet of anatomy first. And then that's all rigid and still and T-posed and
Right.
clinical.
Right. Where you see so much, it's just motionless.
Yeah. And just to get a nice thing here is like a whole challenge.
Absolutely.
But the artwork that I was in love with, I'm like, well, how do I do this? Or like Simon Lee.
Yeah.
That's his energy. Like, he abbreviates shapes so well, but you feel the energy that I would rather see that than like the perfectly rendered,
shape
little
of that
thing.
muscle or whatever that is.
Yeah, he doesn't bother with it. Why bother when everything has come across based on like the energy and the shape? So I think it's kind of, ZBrush is great in that it can achieve photoreal results and you can get insane into those details, right? Yeah. But I almost think for me it's more impressive when somebody knows something so well that they can block as simple as possible and you read it. Like Geo Nakpil, another guy that his anatomy is so solid and he doesn't really detail his stuff too often. He doesn't have to.
That's kind of the progression of the ZBrush artists these days, right? Is you start with, like you said, the alphabet, the A, B's, and C's, and then eventually you start to break out of that shell where you get more comfortable. Because it is, do you find it being, as a technical artist working in visual effects, you do get kind of wrapped up in those technical processes, right?
Yeah.
And it becomes hard to separate in the mind the creative process and then the technical and what goes into film and all these amazing things. But just to be an artist, you kind of have to let loose, right?
Exactly.
You kind of have to allow yourself to just, okay, that muscle doesn't have to be so perfect or that shape doesn't have to be exactly right. Like, you're thinking more about the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And does it read? And does it make you happy? Because and does it serve the design? Because, people who I admire the most, the artists that I admire most tell me that they don't know anatomy very well.
Really?
They're just so comfortable with shapes and forms and expressing what they want and getting an image just so beautiful. And if you really disassembled it, maybe the anatomy isn't right, but it's so beautiful. I don't care.
Yeah. Right.
That's irrelevant.
Yeah. So for you, I guess that transition's kind of become, so when you sit down and you're going to work on a project, do you always look at reference, or do you sometimes just allow yourself to just freely go in and make things? Like, if you just have an idea of something you want to make, and like when you're not at work and you're at home or whatever, when you get that free space and you can kind of let go, what's it like? Like, are you going to ZBrush, you start with Dynamesh or something and start blocking things out?
Yeah, usually what I'll do is, usually what I'll do is I'll just sit down, and if I want to do a quadruped, I kind of have I've already made like a little library of Z-sphere skeletons.
Oh,
so
interesting.
I can start from there and like adjust proportions based on some reference or not. Or like now I've been playing with Sculptors more, so that's super fun. And you can go from Z-spheres to Sculptors as well.
Right.
So I've been doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
And, I just let, as early as possible, I want to break symmetry, because at that point you can really start pushing it.
That's good advice. Like, trying to get away from the symmetrical process. And yes, it does make everything so much faster, but the creative stuff really comes from turning that off, right? And just kind of free-flowing, working like a true sculptor.
Exactly. Working like a true sculptor, you get 2 chances to work on, even get better at like legs or whatever.
Yeah.
And also the freedom of not having to worry about somebody else in the pipeline. Like, you just drop it away and you do whatever you need to do. Yeah. And I was talking to a friend of mine, and they were talking about doing personal work, and they're just like, I have to go home and I got to do my UVs and I got to do all this stuff. I'm like, why? Who cares? You got a job. Like, don't do UVs at home unless you want to like impress someone with your textures. If you just want to put a model out there.
And that's kind of what you get freedom with ZBrush, is going straight into polypaint. You don't have to do any of that.
No. And Dynamesh, you could just do that. You could just make the nastiest geo possible, it doesn't matter.
You just remesh it, and you're good to go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Do whatever you need to.
That's good advice. So as far as your professional work, you seem to be very fulfilled with the work that you're doing at Blur. You were saying compared to, working in VFX, now you get a lot more creative freedom to kind of explore some of these things. And is it the Blur environment? Is it competitive? Do you guys have a very good working team as far as how many artists do you work with as far as lead?
As far as so character artists, there's like a big it scales too because we have a lot of offsite artists, and people that we keep using constantly, like Damien, Adele, a lot of these people who and Hassan, they're from different countries, and we have Skype meetings with them, and they're amazing artists, but we keep using them, and the general vibe at Blur right now, and I think this is to our modeling soup's credit, he's hired a big team of people without egos.
Oh, that's great.
And it's just a relief because everyone loves this stuff just as much as like I do, and they don't care about criticism. They really want to just do a good job. Yeah. And there's no problems.
Does that make it a lot easier to collaborate and just want to share things with each other in that way?
Absolutely. And it's just calm. It's just such a calm environment.
Yeah. That's great. I guess that's kind of the most ideal environment that you could get, especially in such a highly talented group of people that you have at Blur Studios.
Yeah. It's really ideal. And I, love coming into work with a bunch of like-minded, people, and that are just like, I just want to do a good job today, but if you want to hang out later and talk about crabs, we could do that too.
That's awesome. Yeah. So is this kind of like, I know some people like to detach, like you spend so much time at work, designing as an artist. What do you do in your free time? You were telling me earlier you have a podcast where you talk about horror and sci-fi. Oh yeah.
I mean, it's just like a little thing, but I love horror movies. Yeah. And it's really just an excuse to get together with friends that I don't live around anymore. Yeah. And we can just talk about the new horror movies and do a little review and
so you actually review these movies?
Yeah, we kind of go through them and just give our opinions based on whatever. I think what we want to do next is probably a Hereditary review.
Oh, I still haven't seen it.
Freaking amazing.
Really?
It's amazing.
Okay. I talk about this stuff a lot, but I really appreciate good horror. But I don't like slasher. I don't like too much of the graphic stuff, but everything from the new It movie I actually finally went to watch, and I actually really liked it. Yeah. The television version, did you see the television version?
A long time ago, I did.
Which for some reason that just terrified me so much. Yeah. But this new one was a little bit different. It had this really interesting sort of camera view with the camera shake behind him, and it was actually a really good take.
And great creature design.
Yes, incredible.
I mean,
truly.
They did some, I know Carlos Ponce did a lot of designs for it. And the CG artists did their best to communicate that exact design. Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah. What else? So what else are you guys looking at? What's a good horror movie that you've seen recently?
Other than Hereditary? Yeah. I mean, I don't know if this is controversial.
Controversial is good.
Look, last year, Darren Aronofsky's Mother came out. Oh. And that's one of my favorite. I think it's a masterpiece.
I think so too.
But some people find it so anxiety, it'll drive up their anxiety so high that they can't watch it. Yeah. Or they take metaphors too seriously. Yeah. Or something. But it's really funny because every time I ask somebody about it, they're like, "Oh, the metaphor's so obvious," or whatever. And I'm like, "Well, what is it?" And they'll tell me something different.
And so they're never the same. Yeah, which Genius. I think that's too much interpretation, or rather, it's really then it really comes down to it's up to interpretation. Mm-hmm. It's not one concrete idea.
Exactly, and he's such a good filmmaker that so many people can come at it from different angles and project their own stuff onto it. Right. So that's a great one. If you want to go back in time a little bit, Martyrs from the French one.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I've brought this up in other podcasts before. It's not safe for podcast talk, but wow. That film shocked me for a lifetime, truly.
If you're going to talk about quote-unquote torture porn, it is the most classy one. Yeah. Because it actually has a reason, and it's not just exploitation. There's a real story.
Yeah.
There's a real emotion. The acting is great.
Yeah.
And it's also incredibly brutal, but not in a fun way. It's
Right.
not fun.
I watched that one in film school. One of my, it was actually one of my character design teachers put it on in class one day, and
It's
it was
intense.
banned in France, and it was one of those.
Yeah.
But wow, that one shocked me. But I still talk about it. You know, I still bring it up. I still remember it, and
Yeah.
it did have this eerie sort of message in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's a good one. I'm glad you brought that one up.
Terrific.
I see. I can appreciate those kinds of things, and yeah, it always comes down to taste. But I'm kind of with you. I always look to things that have a little bit more substance, and of course, like creature design really plays a big part into that, and monsters and all of that. Like we love that no matter what.
Oh, totally.
You know,
I mean, I was just asked a question about like creature design. It's really hard these days to find, really long lasting, like in your head creature designs.
yeah,
And I think I was telling somebody, I think the last one that really made an impression on me was Annihilation. Just like really good design.
wasn't that a fantastic movie?
Yeah.
There was something about it was the color scheme, and when you get into the sort of the sort of biodome that they were in,
That
and as
prism world.
Yes, and as
Yeah.
it keeps progressing, you get further and further into the sort of evolution, the transformations that are happening. I thought it was breathtaking.
Yeah, so cool.
What was your favorite creature design in that movie?
That bear.
That bear,
Of course.
was the eeriest thing, and the fact that
Terrifying.
its sort of mechanism was that it would remember the sound or the voice of it could somehow mimic voices of the last thing that it ate, I guess.
I think that it's like merging
Yeah.
with whatever
other
the
things.
energy of her death at the time, something like that.
That was just
So scary.
It was so shocking, wasn't
Yeah.
it? I loved the last sequence. I've gone back and watched it a couple times. The
Bjork video.
yes, yeah, the Bjork video.
Love it.
I didn't think about that, but yeah, it totally is.
Yeah.
But it was so eerie and captivating at the same time.
Yeah.
It's like this mirroring of one thing
it's
to
so
another,
weird.
and
Yeah.
it's haunting, and like you can't take your eyes off it at the same time.
Yeah, and I remember the sound design in that too, just like really drilling into me, and I was just like, "Oh my god,
Yeah.
this is really cool."
Yeah, totally. Even the crocodile at the beginning and the sort of sub-transformation. And I think they pulled a little bit maybe from, I don't know if it's maybe inspiration from The Last of Us, but they started getting into the fungi sort of transformation of the guy
Yeah.
in the pool, which
Yeah.
I thought that was just beautiful.
So cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
that is the first thing I thought of.
Do
I was
you,
like,
do you
"Ooh,
look
Last
to
of Us."
fungus and those kinds of things for reference sometimes, just as far as like
Oh,
surfacing and texturing and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it all depends on what I'm specifically doing.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that wouldn't make sense, but yeah,
Sure.
fungus is a great ground for reference because there's so many different
Totally.
kinds.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a great film. I'm glad your film taste is incredible. I'm gonna have to get more of a list from you, or maybe just listen to your podcast.
Oh, I mean, you don't have to. I mean, it's awesome. I love doing it. I just want our, anyway, audio quality to be as cool as this.
Well, we can give you as many tips as we can. I mean, these microphones aren't that expensive, but
Well, we need to be in the same room. I think that's the biggest problem.
yeah. Oh, yeah, because you guys are doing it via Skype, maybe,
Yeah.
or online,
Yeah, it's all Skype because we all live apart, and
and
that's
maybe
the
some of
bigger
them are
part.
in other countries. Are they all local in the U.S. or?
They're all local within like 3 hours drive,
I see.
but
yeah.
it's still a little too hard.
It's
for
still
everybody
tough to
get
do.
together.
No matter what, you're never going to get perfect sound quality for that.
Totally.
Yeah.
And I really just want to talk to them about movies.
Yeah, that's so cool that you guys do that. So do you have, just as far as like your creative passions outside, do you, how much, I mean, you're spending so much time in ZBrush and designing. What's your personal life like outside of, the art world? Do you spend most of your time just in ZBrush and working as an artist?
Well, I do take in a lot of television
Yeah.
and film, and I'm kind of a food fan, and living in LA really helps.
Definitely.
I love travel. That's like a big part of my free time.
Yeah.
That if I'm not, but usually my travel is also related to like art in general.
Do you do like, are you a photographer? Do you take photos, maybe do reference and things like that? Or you just sort of use it as an excuse to visualize the outside world?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I wouldn't consider myself a photographer at all. I usually just, when I go travel, I'm inspired by things.
Yeah.
And inspired by ancient art and just how beautiful things can be.
Right.
And you kind of forget that just doing your day-to-day in a city.
Absolutely.
And when you just take a breath and like take a look around, you're just
Yeah.
like, wow.
Yeah, I'm definitely not a photographer either, but I find myself, my iPhone was just littered with, I'll find myself just like finding a little surface. Like if I do a lot of hiking and climbing, and I like to just rock formations and even just something interesting. I just snap photos just for later, even if,
Oh, yeah.
just so I don't forget,
Yeah,
you know?
totally.
Yeah.
I think I was in, there was like a little Italian village, and I kept taking pictures of all the different door knockers
Oh, that's awesome.
because they're all different. Like there's like demons and dragons and wolves and cherubs and all kinds of designs of door
And all
knockers.
that stuff is sculpture in a way.
Yeah.
Like probably some stuff in bronze or different kinds of metals. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really cool.
That's great.
And
That was in
there's-
Italy?
Yeah, that was in Italy.
Oh, wow. So what kind of travel have you done? Do you do a lot of Europe, or where have you been?
I've been to Southeast Asia a few times, Thailand, Hong Kong, Malaysia, and recently I went to Europe. So that was Italy. I went all over. So Italy, Greece, Copenhagen, Paris,
Wow. That's incredible.
Santorini.
Wow.
It's like I'm as many as I can before I die.
Yeah.
Like, and
Is
that's
this
all
like
I
a
wanna do.
regular occurrence? Do you do this every year, maybe? Do you set
Yeah.
some time away to do some travel and get out?
Yeah, exactly. I
That's
have
such
to
a
do
good
it.
thing to do.
It's so great.
Yeah.
If you're able to do it, like it's just so educational to you, and
Yeah.
it relaxes you and gives you a different perspective on the world.
Absolutely. For the CG artists, especially because we spend so much time in front of the computer and you're so wrapped up in this, we do have this way of sort of envisioning the space and being able to sort of transport ourselves, but then also getting out and detaching from that, it does make a huge difference.
Huge.
Yeah. Yeah. I took a month off a couple years ago and did a month-long trip with a friend backpacking from Peru to Brazil. So we just started in Peru and we kind of hiked our way across and stopped at a
that's
bunch
so
of places.
cool.
And it's that one trip for a couple years is kind of, it sort of changes your brain chemistry in a way.
Yeah,
You know?
it does.
It makes all of this a little bit easier to, when you come back, you're that much more excited to get into your artwork.
Yeah.
You know?
It really like changes outlook. Like I'm not sure exactly what it does to you, but it does something.
It does
And
something.
you feel like a new person when you come back.
Totally. I think it's just the freeing aspect of just not having the responsibility maybe for a bit and allowing yourself to be a kid again and just relax and use your eyes and see the world.
Yeah, use your eyes and see, not just Google search it.
Right.
Or,
Exactly. Get away from your Google search.
Yeah, the computer screen isn't even looked at
Yeah.
for like 3 whole weeks or something. And then when you go, you're just super refreshed at it.
Totally.
Yeah.
So I guess for you, since you've been in the industry now for 10 years, what kind of advice would you give to people? Since you have a great deal of experience as an artist and a visionary. You have such incredible work. And for you, what kind of advice would you give to new ZBrushers coming up out there and people here at the summit?
It's a great question. And I would answer that in 2 parts.
Okay.
Of course, you want the whole package. You want to be able to do, I assume they would want to do production art, and they would want to be able to make beautiful things for themselves. I would say that one doesn't necessarily come with the other. And sometimes you have to work to get to the next one. So whichever one you think you're weaker at, that's what you need to learn the most. So if you're already making beautiful things in ZBrush, you already feel like, hey, I have some kind of an artistic eye, you got to learn that technical stuff, because that's what's going to get you employed and keep you employed.
Yeah.
Production, that's not the fun part, unfortunately, but it is the reason why you would be employed. The fun part is the design part, and like being able to, sit there and just sculpt and, lose time all day. And I would love to do that.
Yeah.
But the real honesty of a paying job, that,
Sure.
That part is a lot less than one might think. And you have to get that design done very quickly, even though it's the most fun part.
Yeah.
And it's the reason why you're doing it, right?
Sure.
It's also the fastest, because you have to reverse engineer it to make it fit to the pipeline for somebody else.
Right.
So just get I would just say research as much as you can. Know that Pixelogic's YouTube page, use everything that you can resource-wise, because basically any question that you have, there is an answer out there for you. And people I work with and myself, if I don't know the answer to something, I just Google it.
Yeah.
Like Google's my
Search it yourself.
exactly.
Or
Learn to help
investigate.
yourself.
That's really good advice. Because it is so tough to kind of navigate your way through and like, well, should I learn anatomy first? Should I learn production tools? And it becomes very difficult to figure out which one to start first and which one's more important.
I would say, do you need money right now?
Right. What does that job constitute? What do you need to get that job, basically?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you need money right now,
Yeah.
maybe learn how to be more of a technical artist, just to start. If you're already talented, then, that'll take care of itself.
It's kind of the reverse then.
Yeah.
You're just kind of working in the other directions.
Exactly.
That's really good advice. Yeah, I mean, for you, you're going to be presenting today with Damien Canderle and Leo...
Frankie DeRosa.
Frankie DeRosa. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm mixing up Method Studios.
Oh,
Which
yeah.
those guys are going to be on later today. Which you're also friends with Miguel at Method Studios, correct?
Yeah.
That's great. Was he also an Owen student?
No, I met him when I started at Hydraulics,
Okay.
and he was the lead artist at Hydraulics and eventually modeling supervisor. And I don't know, we just immediately clicked. He's been an amazing mentor and friend, and just like awesome
That's
artist.
great.
So we both shared this, like, in an office filled with really good production artists. We were like the nerds going to classes.
Yeah.
And like, oh, did you see this sweet sculpt from whoever? And, we would get into like Monsterpalooza and
Oh, yeah,
doing all
totally.
that stuff and like making clay maquettes and, nerd out about that. And then at the same time, watch each other progress in visual effects as well.
Right.
And
So you kind of just had
yeah.
this parallel kind of journey and shared interests that you've just been able to stay connected.
Yeah, I mean, he taught me so much about work ethic and just how to keep positive and like, hey, this is it's a job, and be realistic, and also expect to do the best you can.
Yeah.
But also, don't sweat.
Yeah.
Like, he really helped. Like,
Do you see
calm me
that a
down.
lot on your journey? Have you seen that a lot in other artists? The sort of the struggle with there's a lot of pressure to succeed, and we're surrounded by so many talented artists, especially in CG world and sculptors and ZBrush artists. It becomes difficult to sort of like let yourself off the hook a little bit.
Yeah.
I see.
Oh,
Is that
it's
something you see with a lot of artists? Was that something you struggled with at the beginning?
I think so. I mean, for me at the beginning, like, I just didn't want to mess up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at that point, you just want to like follow
Control Z.
instructions.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like am I doing this right? Am I doing it the way that you need to be doing it?
Yeah.
And you just kind of, I remember how much coffee I consumed when I first started.
I know.
Oh man, at Hydraulic, because it was in Santa Monica at the time, and I would go by that McDonald's and get so much coffee.
Oh man.
And I would just sit there like, I need to make this, and I need to go fast.
You're up on your screen.
Exactly. But
Yeah, that's a struggle. I see that because I teach as well, and I see a lot of new artists coming in, and it's really tough. But I think everything you've said is really good advice, especially because there is a progression of these things, and you can't be great at every one thing. It kind of becomes like the thing you're most afraid of is kind of the thing that you want to tackle first, right? Like if you're really bad at anatomy, you should spend a lot of time just sculpting hands and sculpting just one chunk of muscle, right? Or
Yeah.
sculpting faces if you're really struggling with that.
Or sculpt the entire thing
Yeah.
and don't just make a bust.
Ah,
I
that's-
used to do that all the time.
So you would focus on just one section and
Yeah.
then get really good at that,
Yeah.
and then everything else might fall short.
It's like avoiding drawing hands.
Right. Yeah.
Like, no, don't do it.
Yeah. Like, I'll skip that part.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, it looks good because let me present this as a bust, and you got things pretty
Right.
like in a good place there.
Yeah.
It's like, but no, just do it all.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it. Just
That's
do it
great
all.
advice. Just jump right in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So I guess as far as so you've mentioned a lot of mentors and people that you follow and artists. Is there anything that you could recommend to ZBrush artists out there, just as far as resources and places to go? Maybe sculpting more in clay. What kind of things would you recommend to those people?
Oh, absolutely. Sculpting clay.
Yeah.
It will help you in digital for sure. And I mean, I've done several classes with Simon Lee, and he's really like, if you really want to up your design game,
Yeah.
I definitely check out a class from him.
Okay.
He does online ones too if you're not in town. And he's just like the nicest guy.
Yeah.
And I actually went. This is one of my favorite adventures I've ever done. Last year, I went to Tuscany and studied with Beth Kavanagh.
Oh, wow.
And it was just, I don't know, it was just fate. Like, I have to go. And I just dropped this money into some random Italian pottery school.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh my God, I guess this is real. So you just show up.
So how long was this?
It was a 2-week class.
Holy crap.
In Italy.
So how did you find out about this?
I was on her mailing list,
Okay.
and it said like one class left, and it was kind of at a transition moment in my life.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, I gotta just do this
Yeah.
and do it for me.
Yeah.
And
There are some things that jump out at you like that. It's always timing and place, and if it is a transition, you may be searching for something, and that's beautiful. That's so great.
Oh,
so how was it? So did you just love it?
oh, it was incredible.
Yeah.
And I mean, she really inspired me to think about things differently and put it more into a fine art perspective, because I'm always in production art world
Yeah.
and thinking about how this is going to be used in our specific way.
Yeah.
We as ZBrush artists usually don't have any control over how our audience sees our work. Like, it could be on the tiniest phone, or
That's a good point.
printed out put on poster
It may
board,
not always be in the format that you might prefer or the best possible way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what she does as an installation artist is design everything based on the point of view of the audience, and she can control that environment completely.
Oh, interesting.
And that's just like, I've never even thought of that before.
Isn't that great to be able to continue to find these things? And I see a lot of CG artists looking to fine arts and going back to illustration and all these other things.
Mm-hmm.
It's sort of like this all of this new territory that we kind of keep continuing to discover.
Mm-hmm.
Like here at the summit, we have this Michelangelo challenge, which I've tried myself. Have you seen this challenge that we're doing?
I've seen some. I wanted to try it, but I just haven't had time.
I know, same. I sat one day in the office and tried to do an experiment of just subtracting from this.
Yeah.
And it's like this whole transition of, I'm so spoiled with high to low subdivisions if I've got a clean mesh and being able to mask something off and move it around. But then when you get locked into this one thing, don't you find it's like this greater appreciation for sculpting in marble? I mean, we already know how incredible that is, but it's like we take some of these things for granted.
Oh, it's okay. Control Z.
Yeah.
Look,
Yeah.
in clay, you don't have it.
Yeah.
You also don't have symmetry, and it's one of the harder things to wrap your head around when you're in there. And I'm like, oh, I didn't mean to do that. I have nothing but
go bloop.
my own hand to
Right.
to put it back into place.
Yeah.
And the difference between, and I love being able to look at it in two different ways. The difference between ZBrush and like clay
Yeah.
is that clay comes with imperfections naturally, and in ZBrush
Right.
you have to put them in to make your art better.
So like as far as like we've got some of these sculptures here where you get the etchings and the surface texture, you
Yeah.
see a lot of that happening, doing that digitally as sort of like a paying homage in a way to those things.
Mm-hmm.
But with clay, it's like you brush something off, you get a little bit of clay that's left over. It leaves
Yeah.
that kind of texture to it.
It leaves texture, it leaves energy of the
Yeah.
artist. There's a lot of, you can feel kind of if the artist was like meticulous and it's polished, that's one thing, or if it's just beaten.
Kind of roughed in there. Yeah.
You can feel it. And in ZBrush, you kind of have to reverse engineer that in order to introduce the perfections. I mean,
Right.
that's another reason why I insist on asymmetry,
Yeah.
because then you can more easily get that imperfection in there without. Everything is so perfect in ZBrush.
Right.
It's hard to break that.
Isn't that funny? We almost spend so much time. Like, what's your workflow to make it look asymmetrical? You do 70% symmetry and then break it. Mm-hmm. So it gives you like a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah. Yeah. Which is, for production's sake, you have time restraints and constraints that you have to you've got to get this
Yeah.
character done in a couple weeks probably.
Yeah. I mean, you need symmetry for production.
Yeah.
Like and this, I'm only talking about personal work.
Totally.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
Yeah.
I kind of been steering us into that direction because like the production work is amazing. But I think what I love about ZBrush and what I see artists like yourself doing is trying to break into that and use ZBrush as a creative tool to think like a traditional sculptor and
Totally.
to have this freedom to be an artist.
Yeah,
when we
and
can.
I think it's possible to legitimize the medium as fine art.
Yeah.
And I think eventually we can get there if we can figure out how to bring this to an audience in real life. Like, I've been really, so my next goal is to try to bring a ZBrush designed character or piece into actual real bronze.
Oh, wow.
So that's the next goal.
Interesting. Do you have any of this work that you could show, or is this something that you haven't started yet? Oh, okay, totally. That's
secret design.
Totally respectable.
In progress. I mean, I do have, I think I posted something last week that's just like a little start of it, but I haven't revealed anything about the rest of it.
I can't wait to see it.
I'm
so you're planning
excited.
on doing the sculpt and then doing the casting or doing a mold and then getting this done in bronze?
Yeah. So
okay.
I would have to 3D print it.
Yep.
And then get that ready to go for a mold. And then you get the mold, you make a wax cast.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's the one you clean up and then mold again to pour in the bronze and the wax
that's going to be so much fun.
I can't. It's so expensive. That's the only thing.
Yeah. How much is bronze for something like that? Like, are you talking like, are you going to do maybe 15 inches or are you going to go, how big is this going to be?
I'm hoping to do one about 10 inches to start, just for money reasons.
Sure, of course.
But even that is, we're talking, the reason why fine art's so expensive is because just the raw piece without even considering your own time that you put into it.
Yeah.
It costs, from a foundry, it costs, probably $3,000.
Right.
And you got to think, if you're going to think fine art, you kind of have to change it up, because if you have it in a gallery, they're going to take half as commission. And then you have to consider like, okay, well, how much is this worth? How much time did I put into it?
Right.
And I think the tools, it's getting easier for people to do that specific thing. And I think more and more things are going to be designed digitally coming up. And I hope that
I can't wait to see it. So you're going to be doing this in the next maybe 6 months or so?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the goal.
Awesome. Well, I guess as we're winding down, I don't want to take too much of your time since we're still at the summit. You got a presentation coming up. Is there anything that I don't want to take away from your presentation, but since this is going to air afterwards, we can talk about it.
Okay.
But as far as what you guys are going to talk about here at the summit for you and your other coworkers at Blur?
Sure. I can just give a brief overview. We're going to talk a little bit about specific techniques in ZBrush, how we take our characters from the game to a pre-rendered quality character. Some real ZBrush specific tips using fiber mesh. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's a really cool technique Damien has.
Sweet. I'm gonna have to jump out there and watch.
Yeah, it's really cool. And then I am actually going to be talking a lot about artistic motivation.
Excellent.
And that whole thing. So it's going to be kind of a mix of things, but we're going to try to tie it all together. And all of us are just like extremely excited and passionate about this. So.
I'm excited. I know a ton of our listeners are, and anybody listening to this, the by the time you listen to this full podcast, your presentation will be up on YouTube. And you guys are kind of like the mecca of photorealistic character design and creature design. So I really can't wait to see it. It's going to be amazing.
Well, thank you. And thanks so much for inviting me.
No, thank you. Is there any place that, as far as your social medias, we've got, which I love your handle, by the way, I am Sad Panda.
Yeah. My I Am Sad Panda website. I'm on Instagram at I Am Sad Panda. I think that's the best place. That's where I put most of my stuff.
Okay. Are you ever I Am Happy Panda?
No.
Well, thanks again for coming on. I really appreciate it. It was a huge honor.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right. We'll see you guys next time.